Yeats is Dead, a novel by 15 Irish writers in aid of Amnesty International. Chapter 2 by Conor Macpherson. On the surface, Gary Reynolds was being very decent. The first day off work he had ever taken, and here he was mowing the lawn. What's more, the lawnmower would hardly move. It was an old push mower he'd found in the shed when they'd moved in. It needed oil and general maintenance, but Gary was useless at anything remotely practical. Of course, he could have bought a new mower. He could have gone out right there and then, like an adult permitted to spend money and buy things in the real world, and bought a new mower. But men in hardware shops frightened him. Most people frightened him. Bank clerks, builders, doctors and nurses, barmen. They knew what they were talking about. They had his number. They were grown up and organised, whereas Gary felt about 9 or 10. He was, in fact, 32 and 5 stone overweight. Weighing yourself was something grown-ups did. If you knew how much you weighed, you might have to diet, and such decisions meant you were in charge of circumstances. You'd taken hold of your life by the scruff, and the prospect of doing that frightened Gary. Nothing is wrong. That was his attitude. If it's not broken, don't give it a belt of a hammer. Pondering your shortcomings was the type of reflection that could unsettle you. Something might really turn out to be wrong, and you'd have to do a right load of worrying then. So here he was, pushing a blunt mower for all he was worth. He'd been at it for about 20 minutes by now. At this rate, it'd take another hour and 3/4 to finish. Not that it was a big garden. It wasn't. But it seemed like every bit he did, he had to redo. The grass was all tangled or something. Every so often the sun came out and baked him. He stopped and wheezed a bit. He was sweating very hard. But he was thinking about what Madeline would say when she saw that he'd done it. He wasn't doing it for her. He was doing it so she'd have to say thanks. Force a response out of her. They were fighting again. These little wars Gary could handle. They were safe enough. He knew the territory. They were fighting about one of the usual subjects, the way he'd spoken to her mother at Madeline's sister's wedding on Saturday. He never really meant to be mean, but increasingly he was beginning to snap at Madeline's relations. A few pints and the niggling insecurities he felt talking to people, waitresses, telephone operators, staff at the cash and carry, these would all vanish, and he'd take the opportunity to assert himself. A couple of drinks, and he even began not to mind his appearance. He'd be giving himself the eye in mirrors in pubs. The other night, he mimed playing guitar to an Eagles song, checking himself out in the glass door of the china cabinet, until Madeline banged on the bedroom floor with a slipper or something, and he sheepishly lowered the music.